Before we jump into the next clip, I just want to tell you real quick, we got a new audio network. Go to tyt.com/audio and get all of our new podcasts.
Here at TYT, we have given Fox News hosts like Sean Hannity a lot of grief for pandering to Trump, for refusing to ever challenge Trump, for essentially being in bed with Trump. Well, there are examples of Fox hosts who sometimes conduct interviews that are tough, and I would argue that this is a perfect example of that. Chris Wallace sat down with Vladimir Putin and asked him some pretty difficult questions and impressed me. So I'm going to share some portions of that interview with you. And in the very beginning of that interview, Wallace asked Putin about the #1 issue that everyone has at the top of their minds following Trump's joint press conference with Putin. Has Putin or has the Russian government meddled in US elections?
I have here the indictment that was presented on Friday from the special counsel Robert Mueller that says that 12 members of Russian military intelligence, the GRU, and they talk specifically about units 26-165 and 74-455. They say, you smile, let me finish. They say that these units were specifically involved in hacking into Democratic Party computers, stealing information, and spreading it to the world to try to disrupt the American election. May I give this to you to look at, sir? Here?
Да, положите, пожалуйста.
Okay, I have a lot of things to say, but first, I just want to comment on Putin as a person and how he handles meetings with world leaders and with journalists. So, a story that I had forgotten about, but I remembered through a podcast recently, was that Vladimir Putin was going to meet with Angela Merkel. And he knew that Angela Merkel was very much afraid of dogs. And so he showed up to that meeting with a giant dog. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is because he's an incredibly smart guy and he's incredibly manipulative. And he is strong. And in that portion of the interview, that's what you see. You see strength. You know, he smirks. I'm glad that it didn't throw Wallace off his game. He continued on with the question. But look at the way he handled, you know, those documents. He's like,
yeah. There might be something else to that document too. They're getting a little too much speculation here, but I want to talk about Putin and then Chris Wallace.
Yeah.
So, and Putin has a really interesting answer to this too, that we'll get into in a second. So first, Putin, totally agree with you, but he's like a Bond villain, but like a good one.
He's a good one.
Right, and you're like, oh, well, this guy might actually get Bond. Except he's not against Bond, he's against Trump. So it's like a good Bond villain against Austin Powers. Right, and by the way, I'm sorry, Austin Powers, because Austin Powers is way better than Donald Trump. So like we come in with dun 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 dun, and Trump's like, huh, what, huh? Like that Austin Powers scene, we're trying to constantly U-turn and running into the walls. Okay. Anyway, the second reason he might have turned down the papers is because a lot of these guys who do terrible things like poison their political opponents, they're also paranoid because they know what they do. So he might not want to touch anything that anybody else gives him.
it's like what my dad thinks of IPAs. It's poison.
Why?
My dad thinks IPAs are poison. He thinks they taste terrible. Anyway.
Okay, fascinating. We'll talk about it in a post game. tyt.com/join to become a member. Get those crazy stories. Anyway, so on to Chris Wallace. Look, I've given him credit like at least half a dozen times on different issues. And so I still think that he's definitely conservative. Now he might say no, okay, fine. But what I see on air is a guy who frames issues in a Republican way. By the way, that's okay.
That is okay.
Like if he said, if he was just a little bit more honest about it and said, look, I lean right wing, I'm a conservative, and so yeah, I come at it from a conservative perspective, but then I ask fair questions, I say then I'm 100% fine with him. Because he does, a lot of times framing it in the right wing position, but from time to time, he really asks super fair and tough questions of people who are right wing. In this case, this is not an American, and it's really easy. It's hard because it's Putin and he's so intimidating in some ways, and you got this big get, and then whenever you get a big get, you want to kind of like, appease the person. A lot of the people in the mainstream media feel it that way. But on the other hand, he's not an American, doesn't have any power here, and it's not like you're going to interview Putin again. right? So it is a good opportunity, but he took the opportunity. Credit where credit is due to ask the right questions and the tough questions.
Yeah, let me just buttress your point for a second, because I think in this day and age, it's so refreshing to come across anyone who's principled in any way. So I have no problem with him if he's conservative. At least he's an honest actor, and you can have a discussion, you can have a debate. He's not someone who wavers or falters depending on, how the party acts at any given moment.
He's not Hannity.
Exactly. So
Hannity would have been fawning with Putin.
That's exactly what I mean. So I respect that, and I respect the way he handled this interview. All right, so there's more. Let's get right to it.
First of all, Russia, as a state, has never interfered with the internal affairs of the United States, let alone its elections.
But sir, this is the indictment. It shows I have 12 names here. It talks about specific units of the GRU, Russian military intelligence. Is the GRU not part of the Russian state?
I'll get to it. Just have a little bit of patience and you'll get a full answer to your question. Interference with the domestic affairs of the United States. Do you really believe that someone acting from the Russian territory could have influenced the United States and influenced the choice of millions of Americans?
I'm not asking whether they influenced, I'm asking whether they tried.
I'm about to answer.
Okay, so a lot of the Russia meddling conversation was exactly what you just saw. He would deflect, he would, Wallace would get frustrated because he was taking too long to actually answer the question, and then Wallace would, give him a follow-up, and then he'd be like, you need to be patient. So it was this weird combative part of the interview.
But I think it was the right thing to do on Wallace's part, because it did actually rattle him. He's as strong and manipulative as Putin is, and fair is fair. We make fun of Trump because he acts strong but is not actually strong. And Putin's strength is oftentimes a very disastrous thing, especially when he kills his opponents, which Wallace is going to ask about. But he usually is. But it kind of rattled him, and he gave a couple of answers that actually were bad answers that showed that they might have actually done it. So it worked great.
Right. So remember, Wallace didn't ask him whether or not Russian meddling influenced the election. In fact, so far from what we've learned from the investigation, there's no reason to believe that Russian meddling actually led to a change or an impact on the outcome of the election. Now, they're still investigating it, so there could be more evidence that proves that did happen.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. Look, obvious logic on its face shows that it probably did have an influence on the election because the election was so close. But what Anna's referring to is the government has not yet charged. They didn't say that, hey, this, and of course it's the Republican government, these are all picked by Donald Trump. And still they're like, well, they definitely did try to influence the elections, but we don't know for sure that they did, right? So that's what Wallace is referring to. He's like, but okay, you could say that you didn't, like the Americans were too savvy to be influenced by you, but did you try to influence the elections?
Right, and he just refused to really answer that question. He kept deflecting and giving non-answers. So I thought that was a fascinating part of the interview. And then Wallace finally pivoted to, in my opinion, an incredibly courageous question about how Putin treats his political opponents and his enemies.
Why is it that so many of the people that oppose Vladimir Putin end up dead or close to it? Former Russian spy and double agent Sergei Skripal, the victim of a nerve agent attack in England. Boris Nemtsov, a political opponent, gunned down near the Kremlin. Investigative reporter Anna Politkovskaya, murdered in an apartment building. Why is it that so many people who were political enemies of Vladimir Putin are attacked?
Well, first of all of us have plenty of political rivals. I'm pretty sure President Trump has plenty of political rivals.
But they don't end up dead.
Но не всегда. А вас что, президентов не убивают?
Not always. Well, haven't presidents been killed in the United States? Have you forgotten about it?
Kennedy где убили?
Well,
В США или в России?
Has Kennedy been killed in Russia or in the United States?
Случилось. Что вообще происходит
Or Mr. King, what happens at the clashes between police and civil society and several ethnic groups? Well, that's something that happens on the U.S. soil.
See, Wallace got him.
Yeah, he was really stumbling in that.
Yeah, two things there. One, he didn't deny killing the political rivals or ordering it. He just said, well, don't you guys do it too? That's at least half an admission. And so there's a good case to be made about JFK, and I think that King and RFK and all those murders are deeply problematic and should be investigated even more, even at this late juncture. That doesn't mean you get to do it too, and you get to do it today, not 50 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you say, na, you do it too, that gives me a sense that you're not really denying it. So I think that's an important, at least, like I said, half admission that Wallace got out of him.
Yeah, it's a deflection and it's par for the course, especially considering the way political discourse happens in America. The whole whataboutism that occurs in every discussion. Well, what about this? You ask someone a question about an injustice, for instance, and immediately the answer is, well, what about this? What about that? No, but answer the question about the topic at hand.
And they do it whether it makes sense or it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Like they'll always say about it, oh, well, did you criticize Obama for that? And every time we'll be like, yeah, actually we did. And they're like, oh, damn it. Okay, that usually works. Okay, so anyway, but the other thing that he got him on, and I wanted to go back to this because it's really important. When he asked them, kept pressing on, did you guys try to interfere? Did you try to interfere? Putin said, so was it some sort of forgery of facts, referring to the emails that they potentially stole? He said, that's the important thing that I'm trying to make. Was any false information planted? No, it wasn't. In other words, that's saying, yeah, we did steal information, but it was correct information that we leaked. And Wallace then came back at him and said, you're indicating that they stole real money, not counterfeit money. But you're not denying that they stole money in that analogy, right? And that is another thing where he basically got him to admit, yeah, we might have gotten the emails, but the emails were correct. We didn't make up the emails, so you should still be mad at the Democrats. Now,
but you can be, by the way, I think that it's incredibly reasonable to be angry with the DNC and what they did and how they manipulated the primaries against Bernie Sanders. It's absolutely okay to be furious about that and simultaneously concerned about a foreign government meddling in our elections.
Of course. I mean, so imagine any government, Chinese, Saudi, Israeli, whatever it might be. So they get to pick winners by stealing everybody's emails, and they go, hey, if I like the Republicans, I won't release their emails. I don't like the Democrats because the Saudis need a favor, whatever it might be, right? Mm-hmm. I'm gonna only release the ones that I don't like. So it's totally okay. I couldn't agree more with Anna, and I was outraged by what we found out in those emails, right? At the same time, I'm outraged that the Russians are stealing emails and picking winners in our political system. I hate it when our donors do that. I don't like it any better when we have foreign governments going around saying, I'll steal whatever I like, and depending on who I want to win the election, I'll leak accordingly, and then I'll try to get into your voter databases. So that is totally unacceptable. And so it's perfectly easy to hold both of those logical and consistent thoughts in your head. But to me, the most important part of this is Putin basically saying, yeah, I stole it, but it was true. 2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below, then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.